Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. I will speak in English. Unfortunately, I can't speak any French. I would have loved to, but I totally failed when I tried to understand this language. So, yeah, thank you very much for your introduction. I didn't understand too much. I always heard this word participation. I mean, yes, that's our focus of our work. We focus on innovative experimental design that is driven both by a social and an ecological agenda. A core team of, at the moment, 8 architects and engineers collaborate with various designers, engineers, and specialists dependent on each project. We focus on educational and housing projects, and lately also at cultural institutions. Whatever we do involve the user. Since 2002, our first project, the Erika Mann Elementary School, for the first time we worked with kids to develop their school, their environment. Since then, lots happened. Our participation work gets more and more complex. There are extremely different heterogeneous groups around. Very often we have to activate the people to work with. Nowadays, in democratic societies, which consist increasingly of emancipated people, the judgment of citizens on the quality of their living environment and their involvement in its design is becoming more and more important. The student housing of Sigmundshof, consisting of 13 houses and 14 units, is a project which keeps us already going since 2007, and I think we're going to be there for a few more works. Also there we worked with students. We had developed our first game where students could work out the way how they actually want to live. And important for them, for example, was the communication inside and outside the building. And yeah, situations like the outdoor living room sort of are developed from their visions, their needs, and maybe as an architect, without having talked to the users, I might not have had the idea or the vision that an outdoor living room might be just the right thing for this place. So we designed, or let's say we redeveloped quite a few buildings, like the house of the urban garden lovers, but also, maybe I go back to the big plan, or the house for party animals and coffee drinkers. That's the place, if you go to Berlin, it's the place where the Erasmus students usually live, because they usually like to party quite a lot. And others might prefer the quiet life, and so we designed one house for them, the quiet life on the edge of a small forest. Now I'll go back. And with all our experience, I sort of felt really the necessity to write a book about it, because for me, it's important that we involve the users, and I hoped to inspire people with this book. And actually it's sold out, and the German book we reprinted, and I brought 2 or 3 copies from Germany in case you would like to have one. Yeah, why participate? What does participation mean for architecture? What can participation do for identification with the built environment? Does participation make construction expensive or effective, complicated or sustainable? Does participation save time or money? How do built spaces emerge from the desires of the users? what does participation mean for architects' understanding of their professional role? Participatory design is not a grassroots democratic event. Maybe you have heard of the book Nightmare Participation. Participation can turn to nightmare. But we want to learn as much as possible of the future users and get into a positive dialogue, find a common ground, think together, get excited about new ideas, visions together. We, the architects, would like to get to know their needs and at the same time desires for their environment. However, how can people communicate their dreams and their desires? All the pictures you see are a few moments of different participatory processes. I wouldn't know how many we have done, maybe 100, I'm not quite sure. So that's just a small glimpse of our work. Participatory design strategies, new forms of dialogue on equal terms. And that's extremely important, on equal terms. We have to get talking. And, I mean, this book is called Architecture's Participation, but in German we got a different title, which says Partizipation macht Architektur. And we couldn't translate it in English, but it was quite fantastic because it had the three words, participation, power, and architecture. And in Germany, it means at the same time, participation makes architecture or delivers architecture. And we really like that because participation is always also about power. Who gets it? And therefore, it's quite important for us that we're on an equal level that everybody can talk and on a common ground. And for us, Atmosphäre is the participatory design strategy for one, atmosphere for its sensations and immediacy. It's just like we can talk with anybody about the weather. If I tell you I was in London last week, was sort of 5 degrees, a bit rainy, foggy, and you immediately get sort of an idea how it must have felt that day in London. For us, Atmosphäre is the communication tool, therefore. We can talk just about the weather, I can talk about the architecture of this building. By the way, I'm extremely happy also that I got to know this building. It's an extremely exciting architecture. And even, I don't think I ever have seen such an aula where you don't only see frontal, but also opposite. And that's quite exciting because it changes the atmosphere a lot through the different social interaction which is possible here. Yeah, and thirdly, Atmosphäre proves for us to be a design tool. The great advantage of working with Atmosphäre as a design tool is that it gives space for uncertainties. Might sound strange at first, but the vagueness of Atmosphäre, the fact that you cannot quite grab it, brings contingencies into the communication design process, which offers opportunities. There are ambiguous and complex conditions a participation process can throw up, and these are exactly the conditions we need as architects to work creatively with the user and ultimately as the architect. However, the daily routine of our work, we still experience quite some suspicion regarding participation. Usually, It's the building authorities or architect colleagues who can't quite see how the user can contribute valid knowledge to the design process. I mean, very often the user themselves don't quite understand how can they contribute. And we have to reassure them, hey, it's extremely important for your own environment if we know what you know. But sometimes, yeah, they don't trust themselves in the worthiness of their own expertise as users. The participation process can mean that the architect has to surrender part of his or her control of the design and construction process. And that's risky. But it does not have to mean that creativity and originality are limited. Participation means redefining the role of the architect. That's quite exciting. Participation does not mean the architect is then only the person carrying out the technical implementation of the user's ideas. That very often happened actually in the 70s. There's some gruesome architecture sometimes, but there was a good, really good projects. And the architect still takes the creative part, he's sort of the creative link. And what people know about the demands and desires they have for the use and experience of space is a potential social resource, which must be taken into account in architecture if a stronger identification of the users which their buildings is to be achieved, which in turn supports social acceptance and the architecture design. Socialist Helga Novotny speaks of, and I really like that saying, she speaks of socially robust knowledge. We can draw the conclusion from our various projects that communication about the sensory experience is crucial for the interaction between architects and users. It is based on their mutual knowledge of the atmospheric spatial effect. Depending on the ages, the social and cultural backgrounds, we develop individual models of participation. The essential components are conceptual and artistic stimuli, which we will see in a minute, which have to be specifically sought outside the specific project context. Communication about atmosphere will circumvent the fixed code of the plan and make it easier to express even complex but often unconscious needs and ideas that are often difficult to articulate. And both children and adults can playfully articulate the words they desire, like this young kid showing us his idea of a secret space he would love to be. Collages of found images, painted pictures, models, but also the results of targeted planning games, interviews, storytelling, or film and its spatial projection can serve as such a medium. Architects have the opportunity to develop models of atmosphere from the requirements thus formulated. Like here we see a kid's model of the world of Pippi Longstocking. You know her, Pippi Longstocking? I don't know how she's called in French. It's this girl with the red hair. Yes, you know her? How's she called? Oh God. Okay, also Pippi. Participation fosters needs-based design. So if we stick for a sec at this kindergarten of Pippi Longstocking, that before and after, of course, when I approach this building as an architect, I already have first ideas. I knew we have to open that building, but how? I really try to keep totally open and first listen to the users, in that case, the kids. They can imagine themselves and thus experience the models and everything directly, where we draw from the architecture. And this is the dialectical procedure in which both children and adults can clearly articulate and also nominate sensory stimuli that are important for the environment they live in. Effective designing through methodically regulated decision making. Sorry, it's so much easier to write these words than to pronounce them sometimes. But so it's maybe also easier for you to read them than to listen to them to me. Yeah, to show you briefly our, so to speak, Baupiloten method. In the middle of all our processes is the so-called project family. There's the user who brings in their everyday knowledge and also sometimes expert knowledge. It's very evident in schooling projects. The teachers are also experts on pedagogy. Then there's the client, of course, with his economical feasibility and all sorts of requirements, of course, yeah, the site and of course the budget. And then we are architects. We, of course, come in with our professional expertise and very often do also the moderation process. And it's important that we find a common ground for communication. So in the very beginning, we raise awareness and building up this common ground to be able to communicate on the same level. Then the user everyday life, important category of our methods, observing and recording the user's everyday lives. And the third category, Wunschforschung, it's a German word, which we kept untranslated. It's sort of the research of desires, determining needs and desires. And with this knowledge, we develop visions and fresh ideas and come back to the user again and again for their feedback and to optimizing design, and of course regarding also all the regulation we architects have to consider. And we are convinced that's quite an effective decision making which leads to needs-based architecture, which is affordable and usually satisfies the users and clients because they do know what they get and it's according to their needs and desires. Maybe some of you know the degrees of citizen or the letter of participation of Einstein. It's already from '69, but still degrees which we work with still today. He identifies the different stages where people speak of participation, like in the lowest degree, it's manipulation, therapy, and he calls that non-participation. Or the next three ones, tokenism, is informing, consulting, placation, and finally it goes to citizen power, partnership, delegating power, citizen control, and beyond participation, then the self-organization. We kind of work mainly in this part with our projects, which I'm gonna show you. We try to get together, but there are always a group which are actually making the decisions. Sometimes, as one project in Switzerland, it's a housing project we do there. It's the first time that they're really all together a partnership which has then to represent it to sort of a council who would have a veto if they needed to. But usually there's always like the client in the end who has the overall decision. Good. So in some projects, we do develop even with the user, with the family of the project, the whole process together. Sometimes we just do it with the client, depending on the group. And that, for example, so we made cards of all our methods, like this one here. It's the one is a method which we start extremely in the beginning. It's about team building, about getting to know, about activating participants with the purpose. We call it like the postcard of desires, and it builds a foundation of further communication. We sort of articulate 4 questions. Again, these 4 questions are developed with the clients. Here it says, for example, where do you like to be with friends? And we expect answers, again, which delve into this atmospheric words. It would say, here would the answer of where are you together with your friends was at a warm summer evening in a wild garden for grilling. So it delivers for us the first scenarios for desired situations and requirements of the workshop participants. It visibly illustrates wishes and expectations. It awakens also curiosity, because sometimes we have to still activate the stakeholders, and prepares the workshop's participants for negotiation and planning games. So we have all sorts of cards and decide with the project family what they think is appropriate to, which methods would be appropriate. And I would like to delve now into one of the projects. It's a school project in Germany, a 70s building which we changed quite a bit. The challenge was they wanted to have an open space where students could meet, exchange, be in the times between lessons, and to be able to learn, to read, to communicate, and so on. I got this timeline of the planning process, so you see at what time we actually do workshops. And at the moment we already got we got so much experience that and usually people who participate don't really have that much time nor money. So we have to do it quite effectively, and this was an example of extreme effectiveness. We came, for example, Friday afternoon and stayed till Saturday afternoon, worked in 3-week workshops with the so-called project family, and 2 months later we came back for some feedback. We always do at least 1 feedback, and if a school really wants to delve into this process and got the time and money, we come as often as they wish. It's again and again extremely exciting to get closer and closer to the desires of the people. Very often we start by exploring the atmosphere or the character of, for example, a school space, and with the tool of making collages, we ask them also for a title and a text which explores the collage they have done, and then we present it to all the other participants of the workshop. And what is exciting is that each collage sort of addresses a different topic, And in the end, after having, I don't know, looked and talked, discussed about 20 collages, we have quite a collection of needs and desires, and we know, we get the first idea where are the priorities. For example, I can read even a little bit here. This collage was entitled The Calm Giant's Meadow. And since I got the book here, I can quote. This was a collage of student, and she says, and yeah, I show this collage because the participants, they were immediately, yes, that's kind of the sensation we could imagine for our new atrium, for our new open atrium. And she says, on this meadow, one should feel comfortable and able to exchange ideas and communicate. One should be able to relax there between classes. Furthermore, it should be a lounging meadow. There's a feeling of security given by the tall grass, and so on and so on. And the group was quite excited about this description and said, yes, it should be this kind of open space. And discussing the next collage, like this one here, Flexi Islands, the group agreed, yes, we want an atrium which should be divided up in different zones, but we don't want any walls. And so we can collect all this knowledge and discuss the different topics and priority. And the exciting bit is, if I just would ask, how do you want your atrium? They tell me something they always thought about, but through this tool, they get open up and in the end, we might discuss ideas which are much more relevant for architecture than without it. A second tool we like to combine with the search for this atmospheric qualities of that space is negotiate dream space. It's based on activities and again atmospheres. The group of these games are usually played by a kind of 8 people usually, and they're thinking about how would we like, what is our vision for teaching, and they put down activities where they think which one should be combined, which should be separated. Then they put on atmospheric qualities, and for us it's great to evaluate these activities and atmospheres. So we found out the zoning of the future space, which was, for example, one part the quiet study zone, then there was the group zone, work zone, relaxation corner underneath the staircase, which I thought was a bit weird, but I thought, okay, if that's what they imagine and would like, then a kind of a marketplace was important for them, and a homework zone and more quiet activities. And with this knowledge, we go back to our office and try to develop some architectural space for it. Coming back with models, very often big scale models we can work on and change it and so on. And finally develop the plan. Here you see the atrium surrounded by the glass rooms, and the section through the building in the lower part, the cafeteria, we designed in another workshop, and on the first floor the atrium which opens up. And the view in the atriums, you see the two stories. On the left part is more sort of the very lively marketplace zone. On the right, the quiet, more concentrated study area. Then there is kind of a little stage they wanted. In the back, you see actually this seating underneath the staircase, and it was extremely, now here you close up of the lively place, and you see that the students, they can use it the way they like it. They can sit down at the table, or they can lie down, they can sit in groups in the way they, whatever they want. And here one photo of the place underneath the staircase, and this is actually really a place which is quite popular, and you need it actually for, as in actual, you actually needed something there so people are protected from bumping their head into the staircase. So that was quite a fun bit. And on the upper floor, more quiet, lighter, the homework zone. And we designed it in the way that you have also the views to the other side. It was quite important, I thought, spatially. It was, again, connected, but you didn't immediately, you're not next to each other, but you could view at least each other. And a few shots of the cafeteria. For example, the cafeteria, it was for the students, it was very important to be able not only to sit on the table, but being able to have a kind of a chilling zone where they could sit and actually also eat there. And so they can communicate with their friends in a much more open way instead of sitting totally organized at the table. You can do this participatory processes, of course, also with new buildings. There you're sometimes challenged to actually find the stakeholders. When you work with an existing school, of course, everybody is there. You can work with, and they're excited because the school changes. But if you build a new, in that case, kindergarten, sometimes you're lucky. There is already, in that case, we were lucky. There was another kindergarten which was to be torn down, who was to move into this one. Otherwise, you have to find the right representatives for your project. Again, here we show, I show you the timeline of, in the upper one, the work stage, which goes up to completion, and the lower part, the participatory process. This time, we first came to the kindergarten just to explore the user everyday life, their routines, their rituals, and made a first workshop. 2 months later, we came back to explore further with them, to get feedback, and finally, quite a few months later, we got feedback to models and more, we delved just more into the design by this moment. And you see, I mean, your stages in front, I really have no idea how your stages, the planning process is staged. In Germany, we have kind of the concept design. And the concept design is developed out of the knowledge, out of the users' knowledge and our dialogue with them. And then very often between concept design and developed design, we would meet still for feedback. And with some groups, we would even meet up to the end, that the school kids even be in, or somebody else, would be actually even involved in some bits and pieces of implementation, which is also fun. Yeah, we do work also with the youngest, so here with the kids of the kindergarten, and it was quite exciting model we have here with the two guys. We had met them already before, and the kindergarten, and we had discussed with the kindergarten. They did a whole project week, so to speak, to ephemeral, to weather phenomenon, which was, I thought, extremely exciting. And so we got the kids, or they brought us along drawings which they really liked, lots of clouds, and they brought a rainbow garden to us, a drawing of a rainbow garden, and built a model from there, and it was finally a rocket base with a cloud, with viewing cloud. And it was fun how they worked it out, and it was quite reflective material, and then you're always up in the sky, and they wanted to be up there in the clouds to have always a different perspective. At the same time, we do work also with the adults in kind of planning games to understand where their priorities are. And if you compare this results, and in that case with the kids' results, it was quite interesting that bits and pieces just came nicely together through talking to all these people we knew. For example, that here this group of trees was extremely important to the kids because they were just building a kind of space which they would for theater and so on. And the whole garden was very beautiful, so we put the building sort of through the biggest trees. And kids and also the adults liked the idea that we would have group spaces on one end and on the other, so the kids could actually visit each other and run in between. So they have lots of movement in this kindergarten. And yeah, just these games give us such a good sensation of what they want. And here reflecting the wishes that you have lots of perspectives, and to the right you can look down into the first floor but also up into the sky. So the weather is always present. And the kindergarten in a November afternoon. Yeah, I would come now to a project. It's living, residing as seniors in rural areas. It was developing a whole, we are 1 hectare of woodlands turning into housing for the elderly. We were invited for a competition. It was an extremely quick competition. And instead of immediately starting with drawings, we started how this community could work. We kind of designed a neighborly coexistence. We had worked before in a competition about aging in neighborhood, and here we found that they have sort of in a kind of a core where you have communal, like a community kitchen or maybe some creative area where all could benefit from, and around it. It's not a plan, by the way, it's just a concept. We didn't think we'd put in the center a big house. And, so it's just a concept plan. And around it, different courtyards where housing, various types of housing are connected. And each courtyard was supposed to offer some activity to the whole community. Like here, the gardening house, then a workshop. Here was some creative space, and this courtyard would have a room for guests. And we suggested that we will have from the typology, you would have some housing for young families, then for one person, then for a couple, and shared senior living. We learned from talking to the user that seniors sharing is only for 2 persons, which was quite interesting for us. And we also learned it had to be actually look like a house, this flat. And what was also important was the connection of this housing estate to the rest of the community, of the whole little city, sort of the municipality, that it would be always an exchange to profit from. So the idea, if you have communal activities, communal space, you can have more together. So your private space can be reduced. And for that we developed a negotiate living space game, and there were, since they knew in a courtyard should be sort of three groups always, families or whatsoever. So we put always 3 together. First they were thinking about their own housing unit, again with activities and atmospheres, and then they started to discuss together, okay, if we would share a kitchen, then we only need 1 kitchen, and it can be bigger, and we might open it up to invite all our, or some of our other neighbors. So it was extremely interesting how they negotiated, because they knew, yeah, I might get more luxury if I share certain things. But at the same time, they liked sharing quite a bit, but they needed always their private space also outside at the back of their building. So the bits and pieces, it wouldn't occur to me as architect to actually, yeah, topics I might not be aware of. And through these games, lots for us, not for us only to discover, but also for the users themselves. And people came up to us and thanked us that they could, yeah, have a tool where they could discover how they actually like to live. And from the results of these games and workshops, we developed, yeah, housing characters. There were some very communicative ones, retreat ones with view of nature was, for example, important to like everybody. And we developed types of kitchen in different sizes, bedrooms and living rooms. And in the next stage, we developed again a kind of planning games where they decided how they would like to combine their new housing and how big it should be. And we started to actually get euros to everything, that okay, if you're that big, it costs that much money, but if you share this, it might be cheaper, and or maybe you need a really big kitchen and the rest of the rooms are smaller. And so it was quite interesting for us to listen to the players, what are, yeah, where their priorities are and what is really important for them in living. We gave them also these cards, for example, to tell us, yeah, to decide which kind of workshop they might like, or which kind of, what should be the character and again the atmosphere of a kindergarten. Would it be that way, or is it much cooler architecture? And again, you can watch them and see, okay, that's too sterile for them. We have to get more and more into this direction. And so we developed for each type the sections and the plans, so the spaces. And what was exciting, a week before we had to finish our design, we met them so they could give us last feedback so we can work it in, and they didn't really say very much. That I was totally irritated. That, well, you did what we said, so what should we, and here we see the kitchen for them, and in the end it came out that the kitchen for them was the heart of the housings, and we have here two housing bits put together, the sole compact and the family living. Again, with the kitchen, which could be with a living, separated living room here, and that would be the family house. And these two pictures sort of show the characters where the housing should go to. So this communicative kitchen was important to them, and always this idea of, kind of a wellness, also if it's really small. And they always wanted to be connected to the outside and to nature, which we reflected in these two little collages. And finally, you see the housing types. And there's 1 hectare of former woodlands. There are always these little courtyards with different courts. So they reflect always a different offers. So one would be more for meditation, one more for urban gardening, another one more for partying, and so on, or relaxing. And so you can decide in which way, in which courtyard you would prefer to be. Now it gets to more, we were now in the countryside. Now we go back to the city, to Berlin. There we were asked again in a competition to develop an area in the middle of 1 family houses. There was here really, you see it here, an ocean of family houses. And in the middle, 250 housing units. You can imagine how happy the families were. They hated it. So we developed a model of quite dense housing. We tried to reflect that on the edges it would be lower. So we thought about a different type, so you had only 2 stories to the street. And we tried to find ways how we can communicate with the people and try to find ways that they would see, yes, we get also something, there's something extra for us. It's not only the many people who come, but we can also profit from this neighborhood. And here our idea was to create neighborhoods in the neighborhood. We suggested that we would implant, so to speak, 6 neighborhoods, and there would be the pink. These are always communal bits and pieces for that one neighborhood, but every neighborhood was sort of the host for the whole area with some program, like here might be the workshop where you can repair your bicycle, or here's a co-working space, and here might be some creative zone. And we devised or went into design in a way that the housing developer could always turn it also in housing, because it's always afraid that the community doesn't really need these spaces. But what was good, the housing estate was open to it. And so we prepared again, a workshop. We had the model, you see on the left, and then we had this little, oh God, my English today, the little, how do you call it, sticks? Yeah, the flags. And the different flags with programming and atmospheric qualities, which you could stick into the models. Like the programming, we put into categories, like communicative category, where would you have partying and any sort of communication. Then there were the categories like domestic, creative, or sporty. And we would have atmospheric qualities in categories like circulation spaces, open spaces, community, and dwelling typology. So that's quite interesting. So you could go through these different atmospheric spaces, and you can choose. And it's easy for the people to choose, but it's really difficult for them to explain us in words how they imagine it. But with this little flag, they could easily tell us, well, I do like that this is a little bit wild. I might not like the path, but the path I like of the other flag, and so on and so on. And so we had several sessions with different groups on this model, and they choose the programming they liked, and they started to realize, yes, it might be also, yeah, we profit even from this new housing. And there were lots, bits and pieces of discussion which might be the right place, the right activity, and so on and so on. But it's interesting is, in the end, the answers of a specific group are quite similar. So we made also this experience with schools. Certain schools go into one direction, others in another direction, but as a group, they're very homogeneous, which is quite nice, because in the end, as an architect, you only can build one building, and you always need to get somehow into the consensus. And they just kept talking even after the event was over, and we developed or revised the model for the neighborhoods in the neighborhood. Of course, we had to listen also to the housing estate, and we developed criteria for these models about, which I already mentioned, the community amenities, that there would be public greenways which went through, barrier-free shared space, then the communal courtyards, then there's a specific alley to the courtyard, which we're gonna see now in this next collage. So we see this alley, which always had this outdoor kitchen and the community courtyard. And interesting with this competition was, we shouldn't really get into the architecture yet. It was just about urban planning and about how the spaces might be used. It was quite a challenge to make a collage without showing architecture in the middle of architecture. Now I get to, again, an urban, to recreate a new urban neighborhood. It was in Krefeld. It's another city in Germany. This was an old factory where, which was out of use. Quite beautiful, also inside. And we were asked to create coffee and neighborhood living space in that corner of the building, as in this part. But we realized, after having explored what the people in the neighborhood really would profit from, is they want to sell local products, sell and exchange. There should be a neighborly get-together. There should be space for creating together. And there should be inclusive space. relax, meet together, and so on, and so on, and be outside together was important. So we decided to actually turn the coffee around and put it in the other corner, and that even made us to win the project, because here it's open, everybody can, as it was also a possibility to get barrier-free space, and it opened up to the backyard, which had another big area to be redeveloped, and we thought people could have a chance to appropriate that space for themselves, and which might end up this way. It was just very often in our collages we just show examples. It might be developing in this way, but it's open to you, and it's always with competition. For us it's actually difficult to do this competition. So my skirt doesn't have any pocket, unfortunately. Competition, because we want to give first the user the chance to actually communicate their desires and needs. So we call about spaces of possibilities and potential. In Berlin, a cultural project, it again should become a kind of a social motor of the neighborhood, as did the Krefeld project. We were asked to get people together to think about the future of this amazing big building. There's lots of cultural action behind these walls, but nobody knows about it. And the Turmpalast is already a collage from us. We got together, we had to activate the stakeholders first and work with them in models and again with collaging, with planning games and so on, to find out how important for them actually the foyer, the entrance is. Everything else, they thought, oh, that's gonna get somewhere, but they needed this entrance, this opening to the city, and explained to us quite clearly how this new culture place should be the inviting meeting harbor, and there should be kind of a forum where you come together and join in, but at the same time there should be this organized education studio which will form the new building. And we developed from these different, from this, let's say, this accumulance of ideas, we try to develop variations of views and showed it in a big, and it was an exhibition, and we and some voting in a very public space for the whole day in some market hall. People could inform themselves, ask questions, and in the end they could write us feedback cards and vote for the versions they like best, which was then actually also chosen by the Senate of Berlin to be realized. The last, I think the last two pictures I wanted to show you, we keep developing our games further, how we lately developed our negotiate visions planning games. It gets more and more complex, but since we work with more bigger groups, also we also worked once with 1,000 young people to develop a chapel. Here is a game for schools where the whole community of the schools could actually be together and develop and think about their perfect learning landscape. We work again with activities, with atmospheres, and like a game, they can do it by themselves, and in the very end, the results get presented to the whole group. And as I showed you in the beginning with this workshops of collaging, that discussion starts, and together with rather big groups of people, we discuss their ideas, their priorities, and take all this knowledge home to develop their architecture, which they have the possibility for optimizing in several feedback rounds. Yeah, so thank you very much, and I hope, and I'm happy if you have any questions. I'm happy if we can get into discuss some of these methods.